Hey folks, someone sent me a message demanding, how dare I? That was the question. And it was a demand, and it was loud because it was in all caps. How dare you speak this way with a collar on? How dare you speak this leftist woke crap from inside your church? I pity your congregation. I pity anybody that follows you. How dare you say these things? How dare you teach these things? Now, I've said a lot of different things. We've talked about a lot of different things. We've reflected on all kinds of topics. We've talked about racism and misogyny and sexism. We've talked about violence. We've talked about masks. We've talked about churches trying to be open during COVID an awful lot. We've talked about false prophets. We've talked about prosperity gospel, two of my favorite topics. We've talked about all kinds of things, right? This was about a book. This was about the Dr. Seuss books. How dare you speak out against those books that the owner of those books has decided to stop publishing? How dare you? Of all the things they could have said that about, they chose to say it about that. I don't, for what it's worth, I don't really care about those books. I care about what that particular story can teach us, what that particular subject can teach us out here in the real world. But I want to answer that question. I want to answer their question. How dare you? I dare say these things. I dare talk about those books and so much else. Because the church should have been talking about this stuff for 100 years. The church, since the advent of Jesus Christ, since Christ came into the world, since he was crucified, since he sent his disciples forward, we should have been on the forefront of the fight for justice and equality. We should always be at the front of every protest when people gather to say, the way others are being treated is not right. The way we are being treated is not right. The church should be there, locked arm in arm with those protesters. We should be there, leading the charge for positive change in our communities. That's how dare I. That's how dare I. But we haven't been. And for what it's worth, I think that is a much more important question. Not how dare you speak leftist stuff in a church. Christ was a leftist. He wasn't a conservative. He walked into the world and he changed the world. He didn't hold to the status quo. He threw it all up in the air. He twisted it all upside down and he dropped it on its head. He told us to move in a different direction. So the real question for me isn't, how dare I? That's too simple. The real question for me, the real challenging question that you could ask me is, where were you? How come it took you this long? How dare you be silent this long? How dare you capitulate whatever authority it is you have to the congregation? Because that's what's happened. That's what's happened. We didn't get on the forefront because our congregation might not be comfortable with us being out there. We didn't bring in change. We didn't lead the charge because our congregations might not be comfortable with us out there. Don't believe me? Look around. There are still pastors all over the world preaching about how the Trump administration was stolen, how the election was stolen from Donald Trump. They are still preaching that. And that has nothing to do with the price of bananas on a Tuesday. By that I mean it has nothing to do with reality. But they're choosing to preach it. Why? Does it edify their church? No. Does it make their people better Christians? No. Does it build up their congregation and empower them to do the work that Jesus is asking them to do? No. They preach that way because that's what the congregations want to hear. That's what their people want them to talk about. You ask me, how dare you? There's lots that I have to apologize for in my life and in my ministry. Speaking out against hatred, against racial inequality, against injustice, those aren't problematic. Those are not things that I need to apologize for, and those are not things that I need to answer for. What I need to answer for, personally, me, is for being silent for as long as I was. What we as a church need to answer for is why we were silent for as long as we were. We need to answer for why we are still so silent. We have to get out of our buildings. We have to get out of our pulpits. We have to start leading the way. We have to start joining our brothers and sisters who are out there trying their best to bring about a more just world, to bring about a world of equality and equity, to bring about a world that looks more like the world Jesus described to us. That felt really good. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you, and may you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that we will all find ourselves in front, leading the charge for change, bringing about a more just, a more egalitarian world where everybody is treated the same, loved, cared for, looked after. Amen.